Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for joining myself and Richard Johnson, Director at RJ Advocacy. We're going to be doing a session today, as you can see on screen, what happens when the money runs out. Now, I purposely picked that title to hopefully try and spike a little bit of interest, hopefully try and get as many of my network and Richard's network joining this session to learn about quite a salient topic, a topic that we really do need to give as much energy to and continue to educate on, regardless of whether you operate or give direct advice. If you're coming across clients in later life, we need to be able to help signpost and provide some options. My name's Daniel Edmondson. I'm the National Account Manager here at AdviceWise. And as I just mentioned, I'm joined by Richard Johnson, Director at RJ Advocacy. I will get on to passing you over to Richard just shortly to go through the bulk of today's session. But just before I do, and as true to form with any of these sessions, if we can just run through some housekeeping, if we can keep our microphones and cameras off for the meantime. We do want to encourage engagement and we do want to encourage action. So if you haven't already found, there is a chat box at the bottom of your screen. I'll be putting links and signposts throughout the session in that chat box. So you'll see a little red dot come up. Please have that open. Same for yourself. If you want to ask any questions, if you want to share any thoughts, feelings, or your experiences, please do take advantage of the chat box. If you're not shy, you're more than welcome to unmute and share some ideas, some questions with the group. So I'd like to treat this as a bit of a workshop as opposed to a webinar, just with it when it comes to action and engagement with yourselves. This session is being recorded. AdviceWise will circulate the past session recording link. So if you want to pass that on to any of your colleagues, your peers, if you think they'd take advantage of this session by learning all things care, then please do feel free to do so. For the advisors on the call, this will accredit some CPD, and we will follow up with an email with the ability to download those certificates for your files. Again, I'll get you passed on to Richard in just a brief second, but just to run through the learning objectives. So the whole idea around today's session is to discuss the provision of long-term care and the many funding options and what actually happens when the money runs out, what options you've got, what practical options you've got. So hopefully you will leave today with some takeaway knowledge surrounding long-term care and the many funding options, where the client can go and the steps to take in order to claim local authority long-term care funding, making decisions regarding care establishments, using other possible sources for funding. So obviously equity release, we all operate in the later life market, is one, but there's one of many, right? So it's understanding what other options are there. And lastly, what Richard at RJ Advocacy can offer you as a professional contact, as a professional partner. Just before I pass you on, though, just to highlight that care is actually something quite close to my heart, with family members, young and old, utilising the care system for various reasons, right? Some of them have been needed, some of them have been required to maintain a standard of living, to maintain a level of independence. And without support from professionals like Richard, you know, we would have been at wit's end to understand what to do and where to go. So it's something that we need to look out for. It's something that we need to gain knowledge on. So I think it's vital for professionals giving late life mortgage advice, which hopefully most of you are, to have a solid understanding of the care market. Doesn't have to mean you're giving professional care advice, but just having a broad and balanced user base that will help you go on to give holistic financial planning, to build client confidence, to make sure that your product you're recommending is as suitable as possible, and it ultimately helps with proactive planning. One or two stats, and then I promise I'll pass you over to Richard. I was looking through some stats over the last couple of days, and I thought some of them were quite pressing. The number of people aged 85 and over in the UK is expected to double to 3.2 million by 2040. So it's a growing demographic, it's a growing area that, you know, whether we want it or not, is going to need to be discussed. Over 143,000 people aged 65 and over in the UK live in care homes. That represents 4% of the older population. Nearly 850,000 people in the UK are living with dementia. Now that's sad to hear, and that number is expected to rise to 1.6 million by 2040. The average cost of residential care in the UK is in and around 35,000 per year. that's expected to rise to £50,000 per year, and more so if nursing is required within that care as well. So there's some stats from various different outlets: Office of National Statistics, Dementia UK Care Market Report, and Richard has some really thought-provoking stats throughout this session here as well. So finally, I'll pass you over to Richard to go through the session. Please do take advantage of that chat box. Please do engage with us and share some thoughts and feelings. But yeah, Richard, over to you, mate.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction, Daniel. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity and the platform to talk about something that is very passionate. I'm very passionate about, and it's a huge thing to be able to do this. So I'm very grateful. So welcome everybody to this webinar, and thank you so much to everybody who's registered for this. It's great to have so many people expressing an interest in this webinar. So Daniel's sort of given a bit of an idea about the reasons for this webinar, what happens when the money runs out. But I guess there's also the stats belie a point that in so many instances, there's a massive lack of understanding concerning local authority care, funding, whatever it might mean. We get to this situation, sometimes it's a crisis, and we're trying to get on with our own lives, and suddenly mum's had a fall, dad's gone to hospital, and suddenly it's, what do we do now? This kind of almost the mist descends, and it's like, what do we do? And I know all about this, having dealt with the care from both my sets of parents, in-laws, and my own as parents. And this is all about helping people to cope with challenging and overwhelming situations and to find a way through that. And mindful of the cost of living, high mortgage rates. Daniel's mentioned about the costs of these things, and who can afford it. Mindful of family dynamics, it's a very important point in this, and mindful of new government policy, or perhaps a distinct lack of that. Most recently, National Care Service seems some way off, even if it's coming around the corner. There's lots of talk about it, but we really need some action. And there's a huge amount of uncertainty with absolutely everything that's going on with social care. There's a mind-blowing load of stats, but there's also a pressing need to get things done. So I'm just going to move on to talk a little bit about our agenda for today. So I'm going to cover off who RJ Advocacy is, or who am I, and what do I do with this. I'll cover off the current situation with care. I'll look at a couple of real life case studies that I've been dealing with or have dealt with, and the problems and the issues and the situations that the people find themselves in. I'll look at some actionable steps, things that can be done in the short, medium, and long term in order to make sure that things are covered off, and we look at ways of taking the stress out of the situation as much as possible. And I'll explain how RJ Advocacy can help, and I'll explain how we can together, as advice-wise, later life planners, can assist the consumer. So moving along then, so who we are. So who are we? So I am Richard Johnson, as you can probably see from the slides. I've been working for 30 years in financial services. From some 1990, I joined my first sort of insurance company and progressed through the ranks in that regard. I've done all my CII qualifications, SCII. I've done my diploma in financial planning. I did that recently, and then I also became an affiliate of Solar and did my CFA ER1, CF6 to get my certs, CII MP and ER. So to make sure I was sufficiently qualified to launch this business, which I did just under a year ago, in actual fact. And I also felt passionate about this, and I have probably a fair amount of knowledge now about my personal experience of the difficulties and complexities of adult social care. And to me, the passion I have about this is really to make a change is overwhelming in many ways. And anyone who follows me on LinkedIn and can see all my posts and stuff like that can see all of that coming along. And there is a lot to think about in that regard. So current situation and how we can help. So Daniel's given a few stats on and fairly compelling stats. And I don't want to sort of overload the situation with stats, but it's kind of important to put things into context, exactly what we're dealing with here to sort of move forward. So there's a massive and overwhelming need for care across the UK. I mean, it is staggering, the numbers in terms of what we're talking about here. There's 6.5 million people in the UK that are caring for family and loved ones. And the recent census basically puts that at 10% of the population. And over 3/4 of those are older people, depend on a household member to care for them. So, I mean, who can actually do this and who has the skills? I mean, we're talking about people who are having to sort of give up their day jobs, look at manuals, understand the Care Act, understand so many aspects of it that, and it's a minefield for a lot of people. And just over a third of people over 65 are isolated and lonely, which is a fairly damning stat in the world we live in. People are moving away, have empty nesters, facilities are no longer available. Not all elderly people live in towns or near facilities. So the rural elderly population can, in some ways, be sort of feeling left out. And some way over half of women over 85 are living alone. We know statistically that women live longer than men, but again, it's a statistic which is not so much about it's holistic care. It's not so much caring for people in the home. It's providing outlets for people to go and enjoy themselves in their later years. I mean, there's a better situation for care home stays for self-funders. There's usually a better care situation as they're cash or asset ready. But the interesting statistic here is that for 1 in 10 people, they will spend 8 years in residential care. And given the stats that Daniel sort of mentioned beforehand, that is a massive financial overhead and worry. Where's that money coming from? What are you going to do? What's anyone going to do to provide that level of funding for that level of care? So it's kind of a real concern. So just moving on and just something else here that I thought I'd put into this slide deck was that Care England, who represent all the independent care providers, and Martin Green, I know, is the chairman of that organisation. And these are just top line statistics from the 2023 report, and they're launching their 2024 report. And this is going to provide fairly vital and important data on the ongoing challenges and update the findings of last year's survey. But you can see from here that basically there's a lot of attrition within care home and social care providers. So many are in deficit, and I'll go on to a scenario where that happens, where debts are accruing in care homes, and that may be because they don't feel obliged too much to ask people to sort of pay up, and because people are in crisis and that sort of situation. 43% of providers have closed their service or handed back contracts. I mean, that's under half of care homes. 18% are offering care to fewer people. I mean, that can only grow with the problems we have, and just under 40% have considered literally getting out of it completely because of everything that goes with it, the stress, the worry, funding situations, dealing with the whole thing. So it really is quite a situation. I mean, I don't want to make this a doom and gloom thing, but it just sets the scene for people to understand what's going on. And this next slide, again, is something which I've kind of put a lot on LinkedIn about, which I find absolutely astonishing. And when you look into the numbers of this, considering a government wants to have a productive and everyone in a productive economy, and when you've got basically a fifth of men and just under a third, and just over a third of women between the ages of 55 and 64, normally they're sort of prime earning, top level C-suite earning capacity. They're having to leave to provide unpaid care to people. So it's almost as if they should either be enjoying their golden years as they're flowing into retirement, or perhaps they need to work for longer term to fund their own lives and mortgages. But again, you've got the situation where siblings have moved abroad. There's huge sums of money for care fees, and knowing that there'll never be enough money. So this is kind of why people are having to do this themselves in this situation, and that inevitably leads to family disputes, which I'll come on to in a moment. Attorneys arguing, title changes and property, as people feel amazingly they should get paid for by other siblings to care for their parents. Yes, I've seen it all. I really have. It really does bring out sometimes the real worst in scenarios and everything else like that. And every day, it's unbelievable, really, that over 600 people give up work every day. So that's around about 220,000 people a year leave the workforce. And this just becomes economically unsustainable with an aging population. We know it's going to grow, and we know the NHS, although people think there's a long way, they do an amazing job because people are living longer and longer. So that's something to really think about in the scenario. So the context of where we're operating is in the world that we live in. It's a kind of neglected area, really, and something needs to be done about it um, because of the situation we're in. So I'm going to move on to a case study, and this is about Jim and Sally, or Sally and Jim. So this situation is where, as I say, Sally's husband, Jim, got early onset dementia about 7 years ago. This is not an uncommon situation with the number of dementia cases around about 1 million and currently growing all the time. There's some reliable stats which say 1.6 million will have dementia by 2050. So, and sometimes it can come at any age, normally over 50, over 60. It really depends on lifestyles and things like that, but that's more of a medical thing. So Sally cared for Jim at work until he had a stroke and went into full-time care in December 2021. So Jim is a youngish man, and the third bullet point is a really critical one to bear in mind, that the emotional toll of caring for a loved one can be absolutely overwhelming, and the support and the loneliness of doing that, it's almost as if you've taken yourself out of the workforce, out of almost the sort of the normal way of life. And it's almost something which suddenly people think, wow, you know, what's happened there? But it's becoming more and more common in this situation. So anyway, so in terms, so she took a long time, a few months to work out what she's going to do about all of this. Obviously, overwhelming situation. So Jim was or is a builder, and he owns some small flats in Cornwall earmarked as a retirement fund. So Worcester County Council, where he was under the effectively the care of, took ownership of the flats and paid a percentage of care home fees through a deferred payment arrangement. Now, I don't know how many people on here know what a deferred payment arrangement is, but effectively, it's a first charge loan against a property to cover the cost of care over and above what a local authority financial assessment states you can actually afford for a care home placement. And most local authorities loan up to 90% of the equity in the property. Now, the 90% is an important stat as we go through this, because once the equity reaches up to about 75%, the local authority will explain the next steps, which could be a local authority funded care home, so a step down from the sort of maybe the sort of luxury type of care homes, or a third party contribution where it puts more pressure on the family to find maybe 2 years of funding if remaining in the current care environment. So just that sort of context in mind. So basically what we're talking about here is that in terms of financial assessment, Jim's income is now his state pension and personal independence payments. And these are then taken into consideration regarding his care home fees. So, and also the rental income on the flats is also considered as his income. As part of financial assessment. And obviously, if you're having a sort of deferred payment arrangement, a loan on a property, it's really important to ensure that the maintenance goes on and to hold its value and maintains the equity in the property. So that was important to go on. So what was the problem? So the problem is that the county council or the local authority were not considering all this expenditure with running the flats. Now, obviously, you think, well, I mean, surely, I mean, that's not, that's really, you know, not really the council concern. Well, it may or may not be, but ultimately, it puts Jim and Sally at a bit of a loss here, because the local authorities usually cover only up to 25% of expenditure for maintenance. So, and ultimately, that's in theory that if they haven't got a lot of money, that a lot of expenditure could go on the properties to keep them up to date, especially if someone's going to be in a care home for quite a period of time. As I mentioned in earlier stat, could be up to 8 to 10 years. So, and he's a young man, so effectively this could go on for a long time. So effectively, the properties are now all owned by the council, because basically the equity is now run out, and ultimately it's going to be a real problem. The remaining 10% of the 90% is usually covered. Is left to cover transactions for sales and that sort of kind of thing. So they say Jim's personal payments shouldn't have been paid since then, and will need to repay back. So another sort of body blow in this. So personal dependence payments, for people who are not aware of that, it's made up of a daily living component and a mobility component. So, and state benefits are usually suspended, so that particularly for the daily living component, when someone moves into a local authority care facility or a hospital for more than 4 weeks. So ultimately, as Jim's situation gets more difficult to handle, the money really does start to run out, even from a state perspective. So and she's lost or paid out a lot of money in terms of care home fees in this situation. And it's not really unusual, as has been mentioned, for a large debt to accrue whilst waiting potentially for a financial assessment from a local authority. And that puts pressure on the carers, the families, the care home, because of delays in process, and that can lead to much more further frustration, stress, anxiety, worry about what's going to happen next. So the other thing is that to consider as people reach a health issue is continuing healthcare. I'm not too sure if many people have heard about this, but hopefully it's something which people may have. But this is something which is NHS funding for a primary health need. Nothing's guaranteed, and it's quite a laborious and process where you have to go through a checklist, decision support tool, and quite an invasive process where you normally have a member of care staff, local authority, NHS nurses involved. And if you get it, it's fantastic because it's going to pay for your care fees, but it's not guaranteed in any way, any way, shape or form. And ultimately, when you do get it, state benefits stop after 29 days if you receive it. So I guess that's kind of fair, but ultimately, it's again you're on your own, because ultimately it may take care of all the care, but there's also other ancillary costs to bear in mind. So this, unfortunately, she or Jim didn't get it, and she had paid out £10,000 to a company to try and make this work, and that obviously was another body blow for Jim and Sally, or Sally in particular. And companies obviously, this situation promised a lot, didn't deliver, and you really need an experienced hand on this. I have people in my network who are experts, and continuing healthcare funding is a specialist area, and there are large organisations who can assist, but sometimes a personal approach is usually best with these sort of things, where people can understand the needs, the worrier, and the worries that go with it. So she could appeal, but there's no guarantee for that. And ultimately, even if she got it, it might end up being reviewed. And if your needs, your primary health needs, do abate, then sometimes it can be taken away. But ultimately, within this, so she can appeal, no guarantees, but she would get funded nursing care, which is available at £235.88 a week. So quite a come down from the big funding possibility. So again, a worry. So that's kind of really the problem. So Sally came to me. She came to me through a referral, and just didn't understand what to do. She wasn't too sure if there's an ombudsman with the Worcester County Council. Does she go to a no-win, no-fee lawyer? Is there an ombudsman to take care of this? She felt she needed legal backup, but she just cannot afford the sort of £300 an hour or day fees of a lawyer. So this is a sort of gap that I fill in this regard, and deal with situations where people can help. So that's just an idea of the sort of things that I can help with, and we are sort of in negotiations with the council. But again, it's a financial situation for Sally to worry about. But this is just an example. So there's another case study I just wanted to bring you all up to speed with. This was a letter that I got from. I got this letter from Lawrence Marsh, who I'll come on to. He's one of the care home managers that I deal with in a care home down in Sussex. So this situation, I got this letter basically writing to me saying thank you for helping Muriel, Aunt Muriel, and he's got, again, 3 months outstanding invoices. They've spoken to the county council, the CareWise team, and there's no funding. Muriel doesn't have any money to pay for her invoices. She does have a house, and that can be used potentially. She doesn't have capacity, and is unable to grant power of attorney to anyone. Her nieces were involved in this. So he spoke to West Sussex, and they said, go to a solicitor. Couldn't really afford that. Or go to CarePoint and ask the FAST team, CarePoint Services, which is effectively the number you call at West Sussex, across the FAST team to take over the management of finances. So, but the care home manager, being a decent guy that he was, I'm not going to let Muriel leave the care home because I want to try and do everything I can to help. And the only thing he requires is to kind of get the outstanding fees paid. So this was passed over to me, and I actually found this lady was trying to self-fund, but she had no concept of cost whatsoever. I think she had about £5,000 in terms of sort of basically unliquid assets or liquid assets, in terms of sort of something in national savings and various bits and pieces, but nothing really. So she had no assets except a house, but the local authority administration was very confusing for the nieces. I mean, it's not easy for the best people to understand, and the idea of loaning your house out and what do we do, where do we go. So they were looking for one of these deferred payment arrangements, as in the earlier case study about Jim and Sally, but weren't keen on selling and felt that this would be a quicker route, as the house would increase in equity and the sale process, could we find a buyer, would it happen in time, and all of those sort of kind of things. So this lady originally had CHC funding, but the following review, it was suspended. She came in on a block contract basis, and her situation was reviewed and was told that actually her situation, her primary care and health need is improving or stabilizing, so we won't be paying this money anymore. So I contacted the local authority, and they were very helpful, but the financial statements originally back in April hadn't been signed off. So ultimately, because of their confusion, they didn't really understand what was going on. So the council decided to basically file this unbelievably in the depleted assets pile, where it just doesn't get looked at. It's like the sort of too difficult pile. And the local authority just really wished I'd taken over earlier. So I had to restart the whole financial assessment process. And the thing about that was probably sort of from July, August. That would mean that any care funding before that would literally just become null and void. The council would say, we'll draw a line under it. The only saving grace of this, that the local authority were willing to act as an attorney of last resort, given that there was no lasting power of attorney. And as Muriel had lost capacity, they would actually need to check the nieces first. So this complexity with a situation whereby if you don't tick all the boxes, you don't go through all the right things, can lead into all sorts of problems and can hold up things when you're in real dire need. So anyway, so Muriel's health was actually declining when I last spoke to the care home. And so the continuing health funding was applied for, but sadly she passed away towards the back end of August. And so that case is now with the executive solicitor. So this is a sort of example of what can happen, and the blind alleys that can happen. So the care home with whom I have an arrangement with Lawrence, I'll talk about him in a minute, paid my fees, and the care home manager is now waiting for the fees once probate completes. So talking about the debtors and fees, back to my earlier slide about Care England, about why remain in business when you're having this situation going on. So the care home has actually got total debtors of £110,000, and so he's got his own problems regarding that. So payment of fees is critical as a cash flow scenario. So sadly, in this case, there was a feeling from the county council that there was an element of moral hazard with the nieces, and the local authority get this all the time, where they kind of know there's a problem and they know there's a situation, and that then encourages people to sort of try to chance their arm at this and pull at the heartstrings of care home providers, saying, well, you can't do that and it'll be terrible. And their care home managers in effect has got like a sword of Damocles hanging over him. Do I do this? Do I do that? And what about the reputational? So there are things to bear in mind, but I mean, the sad thing is, with a lot of these sort of things, inefficiency brings waste along with it, and a lot of this situation could have been resolved quite quickly and efficiently without all the back and forth. So that's kind of the two case studies I wanted to sort of mention to you all in my work. So moving on to something so what can we do about this sort of kind of stuff? I mean, it's not an easy thing. So for me, I decided to sort of write this in sort of short, medium, and long term, because there are certain things you can do prior to things happening to make sure that things get at least on the right track to start off with. The first and probably the most important thing, and probably one of the principal reasons I'm doing this webinar on behalf of AdviseWise, is to seek a specialist later life financial advice from accredited Society of Later Life Advisors, financial advisors, AdviseWise, people who've got the qualifications who understand this situation. So Solar have accredited financial advisors. They get re-accredited every 5 years. And it's something which really and truly, if you are worried about a situation, seek one of these people out. There's plenty of them around, and they're sometimes available through CareWise services. But I have a network of these people through the Surrey regional meetings that I have. And these are people, really good people who really know their stuff, who've been in the business for a long time. So go and see them and start putting in front of them the issues that you might have with finances and what's going to happen. And obtain property and financial health and welfare lasting powers. I can't emphasize that enough. Find a good private client solicitor early for this. I have a couple of excellent ones in my network, but I would just say be wary of trusts and estate planning. I don't mean that to put the situation down, but there's a certain 3-word phrase that repeats to me all the time, and it's called deliberate asset deprivation. Local authorities don't like it when funding has been almost withdrawn by the clients or the family through trying to keep money away from the loved one, and they can go back 20 or 30 years. And there are cases. I mean, I was dealing with a case with West Berkshire Council, and basically one of the biggest problems they have is with deliberate asset deprivation. That people are trying to sort of use the state as a sort of not as a last resort, but just a resort of choice, basically. So be wary of that and how that might work. Obtain a will. Sorry, obtain a will and make sure that that you have a solicitor helping you to do that. Don't go down the mirror will. Don't go down the sort of the W.H. Smith route. It's really important to get this right and make sure that things are dealt with accordingly. So research care options is really important. And as I say, there are many difficult conversations ahead. But my grandfather once said there are only 2 things certain in life: death and taxes. So it's really important to get the legal and financial bits right. So moving on to research care. So I partnered with an organisation called Home Touch, and they do amazing work. They did amazing work for my mother and father, and I have a partnership with them, and they are very efficient, very approachable. And I'm tying up with them in order to so that, because one of the first questions people go, obviously, to a care provider, we need care. Well, that's an obvious statement, but the second point is, and more importantly, and possibly more importantly, is how do we pay for it? So you need some inlet or to professional advice, whereby wherever you are, whether you're below the threshold of 23,250 or above it, you need to have some help and advice to work that one out. Investigate state benefits, so such as personal independence payments, their pre-state retirement age pension, pre-state retirement age benefits, and attendance allowance, which is post-state retirement. In my network, I have people who sort that sort of stuff out quickly and efficiently, so that you don't have the sort of 30-page online form to complete and have to sort of worry about all of your worry about getting that completed in whatever spare time you might have. So in the terms of the medium term, so basically, it's really important to keep, once you set all this up, it's important to monitor the assets you have for care. Keep on top of the situations, as things can change very rapidly in terms of finances and health. You might have a market dip. Was that money in that ISA? What are we doing with that now? Oh, there's problems with the house. There's always things coming along. And so it's really important to bear that in mind. Monitor care options. Arrange for a care assessment from a local authority. This is too long a delay from a local authority. Again, I have people in my network who can assist with that. People who've worked in social care before, and they can carry out a detailed care assessment to put together a care and support plan, which will then inform families and yourselves or anybody else what is needed and what is recommended. Investigate the whole idea of local authority funding. Dial onto the sort of websites and try and find out if this works. And if you're struggling with a local authority process, point someone like me as an advocate under the Care Act 2014 to guide and assist you through the sort of labyrinthine process to help with trying to slay the Minotaur in this situation. And it's cheaper than a lawyer. and I can require, and if required, I can make that referral to a lawyer if it becomes that situation. Also, as I mentioned, continuing healthcare, NHS funding is significant decline in health. Again, something to consider, get the right people involved in doing that. And then in the long term, inevitably, there's a 100% chance we're going to die. So we all need to consider people's wishes and think about the best way of how people would like to pass. Saves people from a lot of grief and saves people from a lot of grief, and have all those wishes confirmed, so there's no doubt in anybody's mind what's happening here. And obviously, end of life, think about palliative care, seek hospices, good surroundings, a restful place where people can pass. It's something you don't want to think about, because it's, people are probably looking forward to Christmas now and all those sort of kind of things, but this is part of an essential part of life, and it's something which everybody now, given all the sort of talk about it, need to really think about. So, partnership with AdviseWise, so using equity as part of the solution, very, very important consideration. This is something, and it really depends, I guess, in terms of equity release, from my studies and from my knowledge of all of this. It's important to explore it if appropriate. You need specialists and qualified advisors to deal with this, because the FCA see this as a vulnerable scenario for people. And so go to an AdviseWise, use AdviseWise, accredited advisors, solo accredited advisors, and it's really important. I mean, there's a huge amount of equity tied up in people's houses, and ultimately may want to pass it on to future generations, but it's really important to bear in mind that that may be needed for care, and there is a point to use the AdviseWise platform to find the right solution. Very efficient. I've looked at it, and it's really very intuitive in how it could work. So moving along to the next part of this. So this isn't supposed to be like a self-promotion part of this whole webinar, but advocates, particularly organizations like mine, can make quality care reality for you and your clients and their families. Daniel's mentioned there's loads of stats out there, but an estimated 1.5 million people over 65 have had no care assessments or anything in that regard. They are literally waiting for someone to help them, but there's nothing there. So the statistic runs to about 500,000 people, and it can take absolute months to arrange. So as I mentioned, I have solar affiliate contacts who in the Surrey area who basically can assist with this. They're former local authority social work managers and retired nurses who specialise in this work. So in this regard, what do I do? So I would advocate and mediate on behalf of vulnerable people. I would provide active hands-on support, be there with real assistance, and tailor solutions to individual needs. Every situation might have similarities in process, but everybody's different. So everyone needs a particular way of dealing with things, dealing with problems on clients' behalf. So we've talked about the local authority, the inefficiency, the waste, and the general sort of on the phone for half an hour trying to get through. I can take that off your hands. I can help with that situation. When you appoint an advocate, it tends to sort of make the local authority stand up and take notice. So as I say, appointing an advocate is basically completely normal under the Care Act 2014 if people have substantial difficulty understanding the social care system. And let's face it, who doesn't? It's a minefield and a labyrinth, and you don't know really what part of it you're going to be in at any one particular point in time. So I would tailor solutions to individual needs. As I say, everybody's different. Dealing with people problems with clients' behalf, making sure their voice is heard, very, very important. A lot of the elderly people in this day and age is like, we're trying to sort of make sure that we're making it inclusive. They deserve to be treated fairly and in best interest, and no thought of sort of deprivation of liberty or anything else like that. Also, facilitating quality care people provide people and families deserve, providing a personal service. So the personal service to facilitate the quality care and their families deserve. So that's kind of what I do, and it has got quite busy recently, to be honest. There's a lot of people who are now realizing they just don't have the time, or they live abroad or whatever, and they need help. So this is kind of what I'm here for. So what else do I do? I help people go around care homes and visit, and I basically um, talk to management and carers to ensure the best possible care. Residential care reviews through the care quality commission. So I would do like a mock assessment. So there's 5 main drivers there: safe, effective, caring, responsive, and well led. So these are sort of things, and also provide some NHS care advice. So continuing healthcare and hospital advice, and obviously then domiciliary care support. Look at live-in care through companies like Home Touch, Cover Care. Again, that could be that could be if a primary carer goes on holiday, and also 2 hour break support, Cover Care. There's organizations to help you with that, and providing holistically that sort of care package, and assisted living care support. So find locations for warden assisted, best interest when people aren't ready to move into a care home facility per se. Help with that sort of transition and how that may actually work. So moving along, so I do my best to help people, and it's kind of always reassuring. I mentioned Lawrence earlier on with the situation with Muriel and the nieces, and this is a particularly a case before. So Anna Elcombe, she's somebody I know well. She is a superb carer, and runs her own sort of business where she covers people up and down the country. So they've written some really nice words about me, which I thought I'd share with you, so that you could see that the quality and what I bring to people can really make a big difference to people's lives, businesses, and the rest of it. So so it's really really reassuring to see that. And so how can we work together? So in working together, we're trying to find the best ways of working together for the benefit of mutual clients. So partnerships, and with my network provides services such as living care, so Home Touch particularly, and along with other ancillary services. So solicitors I know can provide legal services, care assessments, CHC assessments, retaining benefits. All of those sort of things can be entrusted to my organisation to find the people to do that, and help you efficiently gain traction on a situation that might cause real problems. So this really goes for advisors who assist in consumer duty and vulnerability by handing over cases to somebody like myself for specialist support. So once the money starts to run out, what do? We can't just leave these people to say, oh, well, sorry, but your money's run out. I can't help you. So I'm there to help people take that on, negotiate what's going forward, and see what can be done to make sure that people aren't sort of left in a situation where they don't know what to do with very little support and help. So I can supply an adaptation of services and referral mechanism to clients when clients are in health and financial difficulty with their money starting to run out. I can help signpost to find a way forward with partners, and have a handover protocol, and sort of and basically collaborate and celebrate the situations where we actually make sure that people have got what they need and got what they deserve, really, in many ways. So, and it's really about avoiding foreseeable harm and making sure that we have the right situation for people going forward. So for people's clients, what do I do? Well, I offer a free of charge initial 30-minute consultation to see how I can help. That effectively is just a chat to see what can you do, what do we do. And normally it starts with, I have had people on Zoom calls with me in floods of tears. I've had people just not literally at their wits' end, not knowing what to do, and it's a situation they've come up against brick walls all the way around it. So in terms of dealing with people like that, is a real soft skills approach to try and help people to sort of understand where they are, where they can go, and to give some thought to what happens. So as I say, I offer all these services which potentially enable people to as I mentioned, how we can help slide all of these various aspects of the work that I do, I would offer to your clients as well. So what does this actually all mean for you? So, and what should you as advisors or members of the public or people involved in care, what should you be listening out for? We should all be listening out for these things. So clients were struggling with their own care issues. I mean, there's So involve friends and family in discussion about all the care related issues, and listen out for distressed conversations. So mum and dad aren't doing so well, just can't find anyone qualified and reliable to care for my parents. All these benefits, which ones? Who can help? I don't know. Winter fuel, pension credit, where do I go with that? It takes 30 minutes to even get through to the local authority. Who can help me? I don't understand what I'll get in retirement. Who can help me with that? Equity release, isn't that selling your house or is that something else? I don't know. And lastly, and probably most importantly, what happens when the money runs out? So that's really the words that I started off with, are going to sort of pretty much end this presentation. And there's no coincidence in that. So if you need any help from me, I'm on hand here to help. As I say, I've been doing this for a little while now, and I've come across all sorts of circumstances. There's my mailbox, there's my number. So it just leaves me to say thank you very much to everybody for taking the time to listen to this webinar and keeping your attention up. And I hope I haven't gone on too long and haven't depressed lots of people, but it is an important thing to bear in mind. So thank you very much for all for listening. Thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you, Richard. And just as I popped in the chat there, if anybody has any questions, we do still have 10 minutes left of this session. So it's a perfect opportunity to ask away. I do have some questions myself to ask, and one sort of side one that we might not have prepped for to potentially put you on the spot, but I know that there's a chunk of advisors here on the session that perhaps don't have long-term care qualifications, or I know that there's lots of offerings out there, there's lots of support out there, but just by way of a quick survey of everybody on the call, if you can just write the words yes in the chat box if you do hold the long-term care and lifetime planning qualification. Obviously that's an amazing starting point to, thanks for those already writing in. Appreciate it, really attentive, but that's obviously a great starting point to help you understand, you know, the various moving parts, the tax implications, the roles and responsibilities of, say, the NHS. It's definitely worth having a look. And thank you, Adam and Miri, for your inputs into the chat earlier on as well. I appreciate there's lots of different practitioners on the call here today, but obviously from my perspective and from my AdviseWise's perspective, we deal a lot with advisors operating within the later life space, so lifetime mortgage advisors as such. So one question I had, Richard, and I appreciate this is a can of worms and you're not a legal expert, when it comes to those three sensitive words, so, you know, deliberate asset deprivation, you know, lots of advisors on this call advise on a product such as equity release, and that is taking money out of the property. That is essentially reducing the estate, you know, and probably I'd be confident to say every single time that there's never a deliberate intention there. It's often because a client has an immediate need right now. So they have an interest only mortgage to redeem. They need to make amendments to the property. You know, most people in their 60s and 70s, their home is their castle. They don't want to downsize. They don't want to look at other options, and they want to make these adaptations or maintain a standard of living because everybody likes to go on a holiday or two a year. Everybody likes to have the newest things out. So I find with cases, certainly when those three words are mentioned, more often than not, it's unbeknowing. The client hasn't known that they're walking into something where they could potentially be scrutinized. So my question really is for the advisors, is there anything they can do above and beyond to ensure that that is never questioned? Because I would hate for people to be walking into something that they weren't super aware of. Appreciate it's a very specialist area of advice, as is things like later life planning and equity release. So is there any words on there of advice you could help and assist with for the advisors on the call here?
So in this situation, it's I mean, in terms of deliberate asset deprivation, as long as it's been done with all the best intentions and for good reasons, and it hasn't been done literally just to sort of effectively take yourself out, you know, to basically say, right, whatever, as long as the intention in your mind hasn't been, well, look, we want to basically, we're going to get the state to pay for our care. We're not going. We don't want to pay for it ourselves. We want to give all the money away to our family. Now, all of that is totally legitimate, and no one's saying that that's a bad idea. But if it is a situation where you've got a situation where people 3 or 4 years before someone's gone into a care home and they are already unwell, and there's a situation where care is going to be needed, and a financial product or an arrangement's been put in place which has literally swept all that money effectively out of the public gaze, then obviously the council would be looking at that saying, well, you may have had a family history of dementia or ill health or something like that. So why did you do that? And it's not trying to necessarily catch people out, but it's actually just to make sure that all the right decisions have been made at the right time for people, in that regard. Does that help, Daniel? Is
That
that
really does. Yeah, because it's easy to jump to a conclusion and say they've done that intentionally when they might just not have known or understood or had the
absolutely
access to information. So, and that comes across lots of different areas of financial services, not just the provision of long-term care. So thank you for those comments. I'm just going to quickly rinse through the chat here. Apologies if I forget any. I've scrolled all the way to the top. So thank you for your nice comments. Thank you for engaging in the quick show of hands or digital show of hands there. So Louise is doing the qualification now. Great stuff. Hope that all goes well for you. And I'm sure you can reach out. Richard would be happy to offer any advice if you need any assistance on that.
sure.
How long does it take for the CHC assessment is a question by Jeff Dunk.
Okay, so CHC assessments. Well, it can. Well, it depends. It's like all state services. It's kind of how long's a piece of string with that sort of kind of thing. But it depends if it's really, if someone is in a situation where it might be a terminal situation. Normally that can be sped up. So working back from that, if your situation is not so, you have a primary healthcare need, but it's not like completely life-threatening at the time, then usually what has to happen is it goes through a few weeks. It has to go to the independent care board, and then basically to i.e. the NHS, and then it has to be set up a checklist approaches. So all these meetings have to be set up. I mean, it could happen quickly, but then you've got to get people onto a Zoom call like this. It's all done over Zoom now, and you have to get a sort of a care professional involved, and they've got to be available. You've got to have someone from the council or the NHS involved or whatever, and then you go through that. So then you have to wait for the result of the checklist, and then the next stage comes in, the decision support tool, which is a little bit more intrusive, a little bit more understanding what priority groups and the primary healthcare needs that maybe have. So it's very difficult to sort of really put a timescale on it, and it's a question. It's a sort of thing where you have somebody on it who can chase it up and make sure that it's being done is obviously the best thing. But to be honest, it really depends on what the NHS, how they triage something. So nobody can really know how that would happen, but you would hopefully know more than a couple of months or something like that. And that's my view on continuing healthcare assessments. It really, I say, it really depends on the sort of the overall sort of is it absolutely desperate now? Is it on like a fast track basis where it's terminal, or can it wait? Because if it can wait, the NHS will put it in the sort of the waiting pile.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that. Next question is from Tracy. Tracy, thank you for your question. So Richard, do you know, is it possible to find out how much a local authority will spend funding a care home when someone hasn't or somebody's fallen below the self-funding threshold? So if somebody doesn't qualify to self-fund,
Yeah.
is there sort of budgets, is there sort of upper limits as to what a local authority will spend?
Well, it's kind of, well, basically there is a process to the financial assessment that they go through, and normally what happens is that they put together like a personal care budget, which is ultimately based on what potentially you can afford. So if you go into a care home, effectively they'll use pretty much all of your income to basically and then put that against their contribution, which is not always a lot. And then basically ultimately it'll be up to, if that doesn't cover it, then it'll be up to third parties to step in to basically pay the difference. So that could mean, and a lot of third parties and the local authorities will say, well, we need at least you need to sign this paperwork on the basis you've got 2 years of funding, and they'll tell you how much it is. I mean, if you look at an average weekly sort of say fee for a cab, say 1,500, say 500 or 600 of that per week can be supplied by the own contribution. The council may pay, say, another 300 or 400 on top of that, but the rest will have to be paid by a third party. Otherwise, it'll have to go into the person would have to go to a local authority care home. That's how it would work. So ultimately, they would, in theory, they would fund the sort of luxury care homes as long as you're prepared to put some money in. But if you're not, then ultimately they won't do that. unless you've got massive assets, will let you do that. It really depends what your financial circumstances are. It's not necessarily cut and dried like that.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you. Thank you very much, Richard.
Problem.
And then very last question from Martin Jones. Martin, thank you for your question. Can you give an idea as to how long the process takes currently for applying for a court of protection? I'm going to guess it's
Probably if we got I mean, again, that's something that I can put towards put people in my network, people like Helen Wynn, people like Helen Ignon, the people who are in my network who would be pleased to sort of provide some sort of take on this and how that would work. I don't really deal with solicitors, but in terms of taking how long, I would just say this to answer that: get a power of attorney. Get that sorted out first. Honestly, you don't want to go down the route of court protection. It really is onerous and painful. Have to appoint, the official solicitor to write wills and all of that sort of stuff. To be honest, it's something which is really should be the last resort. But sadly, and I guess your question begs this, Martin, that ultimately people find themselves in a situation whereby they haven't sort of done the short-term thing that I suggested, which, it's a bit of a pain, got to go around the house to sign this, 84 quid, haven't really got that in this month or whatever it might be, or well, go and find a solicitor, it takes too long. Well, it might be expensive, but it's one of these sort of kind of things, it takes a bit of time, but actually by not doing it, there is an opportunity cost lost of making this whole process a lot more simpler for you and your family. I
yeah.
would say that. So,
So
yeah,
definitely better to be proactive as opposed to reactive. But
absolutely right.
as a lot of the advisors on this call will know, sometimes they are dealing with a client that they otherwise haven't dealt with previously.
Yeah.
Is a silly question, but is a court protection something you can apply for yourself, or do you need to appoint a
You
solicitor?
really need to go through solicitors. I mean, it's something which effectively you are effectively appointing someone to act on that person's behalf through the courts, effectively. So really, the method of going to the courts is really through solicitors, and they would have the. And to be honest, from an expertise point of view, you'd be far better off doing it that way around. I mean, I haven't really ever heard of anyone going to the courts as a member of the public. And ultimately, there's probably a huge amount of red tape to go through and a huge amount of sort of, understanding that ultimately it's best to leave to a qualified professional in order to make sure that that smooths that path for you if it
Yeah,
necessary. I mean, it really is. I mean, a lot of people haven't really talked about the court of protection. I mean, court of protection, no one ever used to hear of it, to be honest, years and years ago. You think, well, what do they do? And it's like, it sounds a bit kind of draconian, but actually they are so busy now that actually dealing with people who've lost mental capacity and didn't have a power of attorney. And what happens? There's a court has to take over, and it's again that's a massive state overhead. That I mean, ultimately, powers of attorneys, those sort of kind of things, is get it done. It's really important. I mean, you owe it to your loved ones to do these sort of things. They've done all this stuff for you to make you able to do all the things that you do. It really is critical that spending a bit of time before the event, before it gets critical, before it becomes like sort of ground zero situation. Do it now. Really do it now. Yeah.
good
So
stuff. Good stuff. And I think that sort of brings us around to the end of the session.
okay.
Adam, I can see you have got a question in the chat. If it's okay with you, I'll share that question with Richard after the session and I'll get him to come back directly to you if that's okay.
Sure.
Just because I'm conscious a lot of people will have 11 o'clocks and
Yes.
we want to wrap up formally before
Yep.
everybody starts to jump off. But just a massive thank you to Richard for joining us today, sharing his knowledge, his expertise, and some good practice or some great practice for you all to take into your roles, your practice, whatever industry you're operating in, and whatever specialism you have. It's great to be able to bring this all together and explain what happens when the money runs out. Going back to the title just there. Just to thank you all for joining us as well on this session. As I mentioned, and there has been a couple of questions, this session you will get the follow-up email with a recording link. It might not be by the end of today, it might be tomorrow morning when that email goes out. This will be CPD accredited, so you'll get your certificates attached to that email as well. So have a look for that. There'll be a link to go and download it. And watch out for more events from AdviseWise too. We've got a couple of good events coming up over the next couple of weeks where there's some product innovation in the later life sector. So namely Pure Retirement's ISM, and the Royal London product overview. They've obviously introduced some new products and innovations into the market as well recently. So watch out for that. You'll be on our mailing list, I'm sure. If you're not already registered with AdviceWise, it's completely free to do so. There's loads of tools and resources available to assist you in your advice process and journey. There's tools and resources that you can use standalone, or we'd absolutely love you to use AdviceWise as a holistic sourcing platform that includes your sort of documentation, your fact find, your suitability letter, various calculators, and so on. It's completely free to use. And if you want to book a demo, I appreciate sometimes tech and some of the jargon goes straight over. It does for myself. But if you want to book a demo with me or any of the team, we will happily walk you through some of these tools and resources and the processes. Sometimes I get feedback that it's too intuitive for its own good. So let's jump on a demo and do that as well. But that's absolutely everything from us. Thank you all again for joining us. Have a great rest of today and great rest of the week, and hopefully that weekend comes quicker than last week.